we are getting closer and closer to everyone getting their hands on Stormgate here. I found this video. We're going to be reacting to it. It's inside Stormgate. And how the devs use Unreal Engine 5 for a brand new RTS.
We talked about how the team is dealing with Unreal Engine 5 for a real-time strategy game, and how they're looking to innovate in the genre with cool rendering and networking technology. So without further ado, I'm going to give the mic away to my past self with slightly longer hair, and take it away, Alex.
Just real quick here. I never had a way of articulating it before, but I always felt like there was this difference between Blizzard RTS games and like every other RTS game I would play. And it was like, I now realize it's just a responsiveness. Like I felt like there in all the Blizzard RTS games, there was like a thickness and a you could feel like the physicalness of the units and the way they bounced on each other or would flow with each other in groups. So it's really exciting that Frost Giant is very focused on the engine for the RTS, because you can have as many cool ideas as you want. But most RTS games, when you play them and it comes down to the micro, it's not as good as StarCraft 1, StarCraft 2, or Warcraft 3. So this is very cool.
Okay, so I'm going to ask here the first question, getting into this right away, Andrew. The interesting part of this is that there's like two internal things running in the background here, Snowplay and, of course, Unreal Engine 5. What does Snowplay handle specifically, and what is Unreal Engine 5 handling in this configuration here of how the RTS game works?
Yeah, I'll start with the Unreal side. So that I like to think of it as handling the sights and sounds. So we treat Unreal as the presentation layer. So anything visual you see, audio, animations, even the UI, that's all driven and handled by the Unreal side. And then Snowplay handles pretty much everything else. Like it all starts with the gameplay, so the simulation, and everything related to the gameplay side of things. So we have a really nice like separation of responsibilities there, and they're fully independent from each other there.
Okay, cool. So when did the idea come around to actually do that instead of using, for example, like UE5 and just plugging in your own gameplay there, like C++ or even Blueprint? Like, why Snowplay and UE5 for visuals and sounds?
Yep. So it all goes back to like when Frost Giant first started and trying to accomplish the goals for the game we're making. So we're making Stormgate, which is a real-time strategy game. And right from the outset, we wanted to make like the next generation or the next great RTS. And in order to do that, we came up with 4 key pillars that we wanted to make sure that we hit: campaign, competitive, co-op, and custom games.
Mm-hmm.
So
This is another thing. I'm going to jump in here for a second, guys. So when I started casting, one of the things that I think surprised me, and I guess maybe it will not be surprising to some of you, maybe it will be, but I didn't realize how important it was to have all the different parts of an RTS in order for it to succeed. Apparently, like everybody, almost virtually everybody that bought StarCraft 2 or StarCraft 1 played through the campaign. So the campaign is kind of like a gateway drug to get into the multiplayer. Like Artosis and me never even beat the Legacy of the Void storyline. We were always focused on multiplayer. But it's good to hear they're doing that. Also, that a lot of people, probably not you who are watching at home, but a lot of people, they pick up RTS and they find it too daunting. They can't get into it. So you need to have a co-op, a team play element. That's one of the reasons why MOBAs and tactical shooters have had such success is playing with people on your team is just less intimidating. So although I'm not much of a team game guy, I did play competitive StarCraft 1 2v2 when I was the clan leader for RS Gaming. But most of my journey as a competitive player has been, 1v1 hardcore. But it's good to see that they're kind of filling in all the parts to make an actual complete RTS that's going to get every type of RTS fan and hopefully new players too.
we explored all like the different off-the-shelf solutions like Unreal and Unity, and none of them really by themselves foot the bill to accomplish what we were going after for that like really responsive like engine that could handle like really high unit counts in the hundreds or even over 1,000. So that's when we realized, oh, okay, we need to start looking at like our own custom solution to make all of that possible.
Oh, okay. Well, that actually, I'm just going to piggyback back off of that because there's something you mentioned there with a lot of units on screen, and was just thinking about a lot of the UE5 games I've seen so far, where it's just like a handful of skinned units, like of individuals in a screen, but they're not hundreds of units on screen at a time, hundreds of animating characters. Does that mean Snowplay is actually doing like all the skinning and everything like that? And how is actually the animation done in the game to maintain the performance? Because I think a lot of games, I'm just thinking now on like Company of Heroes, for example, like they degrade the animation rate of things at a distance or on lower settings and things like that. How you doing animation here?
So all of that is, as much as I'd love Snowplay to take credit for as much as it could, all of that is handled on the Unreal side. So the two real bottlenecks for like going over like 50 or 100 units with Unreal are on the network side, just having to replicate that much data between the client and server, and then on the just sheer number of like fully functional actors and running the simulation side of things. So those are the two main ones. So Unreal handles all the skinning, all the rendering, like all of the non-deterministic physics, 100%.
Right.
And we do a few things to make it a little bit like reduce the cost on the rendering side, but for the most part, Unreal's pretty good.
Nice.
I gotta jump in here about the number of units possible. It seems like, looking back to StarCraft 2, the CPU side of like just getting the game to run when you get to the climax of a game with like all 200 units, say, on every side was like where things really came crashing down on my rig back then anyway. Is the move to UE5, and especially with pathfinding handled by Snowplay, kind of does that make it easier on the CPU? Is it a better optimized setup these days to handle that many individual actions and animations, obviously, all at once?
Yeah, so that is the core reason why we decided to go with Snowplay and do the entire simulation just in-house. All of it's thanks to James Anhalt, who is the chief architect. That's kind of the mastermind behind it all, of taking all that experience that they learned from building StarCraft and Blizzard RTS engines and just building our simulation in Snowplay.
So this is the guy who, if I understand correctly, made like the architecture for StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. I think Warcraft 3 as well. But we basically wouldn't be able to play RTS games the way that we do now if it wasn't for the work he did.
From the ground up, right from the get-go, to support that many units. So it all comes down to how fast can you process like all those units in terms of like the collisions, the pathfinding, all their abilities. And by taking all that knowledge, knowing we had a target of around 3 times the speed of StarCraft 2, and just starting from there, all of our decisions just kind of gravitated around that like really responsive gameplay for really, really high unit counts.
I'd like to talk about the pathfinding as well, because this is actually a question from Will, but I totally agree with the premise of it. Like pathfinding in StarCraft 1, if you remember, especially certain units, I think Dragoons maybe, the Protoss, they had some issues getting from A to B, much improved in StarCraft 2. Is there sort of, what level of improvement does sort of Snowplay allow for in terms of, does it enable a much improved level of pathfinding compared to what we saw before, or is it about kind of a similar level?
Yeah, our original target was like at least get to par with the StarCraft 2, and that was an ambitious target to start with.
Do not let it ever be StarCraft 1.
All the learning.
StarCraft 1, I feel like some units, like especially with Zerg, are very responsive, but Dragoons, Goliaths going up and down ramps, Reavers sometimes just not responding. I mean, that is really the big valid criticism of StarCraft 1 is, I think there's interesting things that can be done with the pathing and cool micro tricks, but, you can't ever have a game be that buggy again.
That James had from StarCraft 2, because he has a famous GDC talk on like everything that went into pathfinding. Like he took the lessons learned and put them into Stormgate. And there's still a lot of work to do, but we've at least hit the same bar, and in a way that's far more performant than StarCraft 2 was. And we're going to be continually improving and handling all the edge cases, which is typically what kills pathfinding, is all the nuances and edge cases and map specific scenarios that you have to deal with. But yeah, I'm fairly optimistic we'll be able to exceed StarCraft 2's expectations there.
Yeah, I don't remember any issues with StarCraft 2, to be honest. It was just the first game I remember just wandering units.
Yeah, I mean,
that's good to hear.
I think one of the things I always notice actually in RTS games is when units of different sizes interact with one another. They, like, which one gets priority to, like, for example, like you have the equivalent of like an Ultralisk and a Zergling. When they start walking around each other, that's when you get into issues in games, I've always noticed. And there is actually quite a difference unit size in this game, I noticed, between like the smallest and the largest. So that's one thing to see in the final product. But I'm actually curious about which version of UE5 you chose to like start with in terms of integration. Like, which version of UE5 are you on right now?
Yeah, we started with I can't remember if we started with the tail end of 4 and then immediately upgraded to 5, but almost all of our development's been on Unreal 5.
Oh, wow.
So production. So we hit that sweet spot of it. The preview was ready just as we were hitting like full production, and we've been on 5 like right from the onset.
And given like the separation you talked about earlier, is, say, since it is just primarily rendering, is it easy to integrate like 5? Like, if you're on 5.2 right now, is it easy to upgrade to 5.3 and then 5.4?
Have you guys actually messed with the Unreal 5? I don't. I like dabbled a little bit with like kind of messing with games like way early in the day, like QBasic, a little bit of Visual Basic and C++. But like I downloaded Unreal 5 maybe a month ago to mess around with it. It's crazy what you can do on it. I actually was not aware it was on Unreal 5. I thought it was like still on Unreal 4. I must have been confused about that, but clearly I'm wrong. So this is interesting.
Iteratively over time to get all the advancements from them, or is it actually a challenge?
Yeah, it's relatively easy. We're mostly vanilla Unreal. There's a few customizations we had to make to do some UI improvements, but the upgrades have been fairly seamless and not a big tax on the team at all. So we've been pretty close to staying up to date with each release that's come out.
Okay, that's amazing. So as a part of UE5, this is my question, because it's always been my bugbear since like 5 years ago. I'm going to ask about right now, is the game using the DX12 render in UE5 or DX11 render? Actually, there is a DX11.
Currently supporting both. We're getting better results, oddly enough, with DirectX 11. But we aren't sure exactly why.
Okay, so that was just Greek to me. I don't know what they just said there, but I guess it just depends on how you're going to render the game.
That's something we're going to be looking into downstream. One like big disclaimer is we are still in active development, so there's
of course
a lot of questions where I could say, yep, we're looking into that. Yeah, right now we support both DirectX 11 and 12. We saw with our closed testing that DirectX 12 wasn't quite as stable or as performant as we expected it to be, so we'll be looking into that.
Okay. Because like one of the big issues is just PSO compilation stutter, shader compilation stutter in Unreal Engine 5, and depending upon the version you're using, can be better or worse, and what steps the team. Basically, do you have it on your minds as development is going on to make sure that the game is pretty stutter free when it does come out?
Yes. So we haven't observed any of that in our latest round of testing. But it's something that as soon as we see any of like the smoke or reports of it, we're going to be jumping on to ensure like it is not a problem with our game.
Okay, good. In terms of UE5 basic features, like the ones that it was really advertising heavily.
God,
VSM,
look how good Unreal 5 is. It's insane.
Lumen. Is the project looking to take advantage of any of them for like even higher graphical settings at all? Or are you going to stick with like older technology to keep the frame rates up?
So the there's a lot of nuance to that question. So the answer is yes, we explored and are exploring all of the newest technologies. The one we're currently using is Niagara to really give us those like really cool visual effects like across the board. And that's been just a delight to see that that life and what our VFX artists can do with it. For Nanite, we are planning on exploring that in the next couple of months just to see what we can leverage from there. But so far we haven't been using it. Lumen, that one we really were excited about just in how amazing the lighting can be. Just like Unreal out of the box doesn't support what we need from an RTS on the simulation side. The Lumen assumes it's a first person or third person perspective with a contiguous camera in order for it to, I guess, pre-calculate the moving around. But with
that
an
makes
RTS,
sense.
yeah, you have to jump around to all the different parts of the map. So it looked really good, but there's like a frame or so of like this little visual like update that you can kind of see.
I see.
Notice it, and that's something that we've had to table it for now, and we'll see if they can make some improvements there.
I guess on a similar vein to that question, with the potential for really high-end features, Lumen and beyond, that could really tap into higher-end GPUs. Is there a kind of mindset as well to keep things visually quite consistent for competitive play between someone who play on a low-end machine and a high-end machine? Are you kind of aware of, keeping like the visibility of units the same in order to keep things fair?
Yeah, this is one of the big issues with RTS is kind of having it palatable to the viewer where it's very obvious what's going on. In some ways, I do feel like StarCraft 1 was easier for people that didn't play RTS to follow than StarCraft 2. I think because of the color contrast, there was a lot of, and I've said this before in other videos, but a lot of gray and blue and purple in StarCraft 2. One thing I like, at least with the maps I've seen, is they seem to have this deep earthy gray in a lot of parts of the maps. And then like one player's red and one player's blue, so you kind of get that contrast, and it kind of stands out. It pops a little bit more. I do wonder, like, excuse me, how much detail can you put in with it being easy to follow? Is there going to be like a standard tournament mode for viewers? Also, if you go look at StarCraft 2, if you watch the pros play, it looks like they're playing like a PlayStation 1 game because the settings are super low. And it's just easy to process, which is fine, by the way. I mean, I'm not for that or against that, but I do wonder, what is there going to be a standard format for what players watch? I guess we won't know yet, or we won't know until we do some competitive matches. But it is an interesting thought. So I'll let these guys keep talking.
In online games?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our core values as a part of building great games is like gameplay comes first, and the visuals need to be beautiful and look great, but that's I wouldn't say a backseat, but it's along for the ride. Better way of saying it. So all of our testing, we have like lower spec machines that we make sure all the visuals have a fair, have no additional gameplay advantage. So anything like our Infernal Shroud effect, where you can see units going through the shroud, we make sure that is going to work and function in an identical way as it would at the higher end machines.
So I guess the moving to Snowplay allows for this incredible netcode as well. Am I right in saying? And that's a huge positive for like the competitive scene. And there's a 3 times uptick in the poll count, like the update compared to StarCraft 2. Is it just a difference in technology between the two, or is there a difference in the philosophy and how it's designed? How is that kind of managed in terms of how it's implemented?
Yeah, the high level approach to the technology is pretty similar, and it's similar across like all games that use what we call like a deterministic simulation. So we're not really inventing anything novel there. We're just taking all the lessons we've learned in the past and purpose-built Snowplay from the ground up to be as performant as possible in order to hit those tick rates. So like using the mindset of optimizing right from the get-go to make sure we have performance in mind. That's I'd say if there was one thing that's like the differentiator, but that we brought with Snowplay. And then a lot of the lessons learned as from StarCraft, and then many of us are from other companies that also worked on deterministic simulation titles. We learned downstream that there's all these features that you need to be able to support that weren't a part of the original planning. So replays are a big part of it, which typically you're aware of from the get-go. The ability to observe and spectate games that came on a little bit more downstream. And then there's newer, better ways to be able to approach spectating. And then, just a whole suite of things that all kind of tie into that core simulation needing to be ultra fast, and then different general techniques for making sure that it is as performant as possible. And one of the techniques, what I hopefully you'll ask some questions around it, is rollback. So that's one thing that we never really thought about being something.
Rollback is middleware designed to help create a near lagless online experience for various emulated arcade games and fighting games. The program was created by Tony Cannon. I actually had dinner with him while he was out in Korea for the League of Legends World Finals. Co-founder of the fighting game community site Shoryuken and the popular Evolution Championship series. Those guys are a big deal in the where fighting games ended up and where they're at now. So rollback, it's kind of like a predictive netcode in a way. I'm very curious to see how it's going to feel for StarCraft, but basically rollback netcode allowed fighting games to actually be played in a competitive way online where you just almost couldn't before. Part of it was that there was too many people that were playing their fighting games on Wi-Fi, but even if you had 2 high-speed internet connections, it would just have moments of chunky lag that would ruin the game. But if you guys play like Street Fighter 6, which I know we've streamed that a little bit here, I actually want to get back into it if I have time. Anyways, it's like you're laddering StarCraft now. Like, it's totally doable. So it's cool they're doing that. And the idea of any RTS game being even more responsive than StarCraft 2 is pretty crazy, to be honest. So, it's interesting.
Viable for RTS at least 10 plus years ago when the original engines were developed. So that's something we had in the front of mind when developing the tech.
On rollback especially, that's something I celebrated quite a lot in the fighting game community. With I think remember Street Fighter 3 had one of the first implementations of rollback way back when. People used it before it was even possible officially on their own servers. I remember that. But it was always a fighting game thing, and I wondered if translating that to an RTS, is it a smooth translation? Are there like advantages or challenges to making it work in an RTS sort of scenario?
The short answer is yes. There's lots of challenges. And we knew we were being very ambitious with trying to tackle rollback. But the 2 things that we knew would be challenges ahead are RTS's simulation is, like, especially to support the high unit counts and just like how much is going on, are typically heavier or more expensive than a fighting game. So we knew there's a lot of effort that had to go into performance right from the get-go. And then the other, and one of the downsides of rollback, is when you do instantiate that rollback, there's the potential for some like visual artifacts when you resimulate. And with RTS, there's a lot of just visual effects and abilities going off. So we're a bit apprehensive.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too, is if you're playing on rollback netcode in a fighting game, sometimes like you'll see a fireball animation that actually didn't happen, and then it'll like go back and change to what the player did. But I'm curious what that would do with like seeing units on the edge of fog of war. I actually don't know. I'm curious. Let me just see what he says.
Curious and interested in like how that would actually manifest when you're playing through it all.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice as a result of that? Because like at what point, if you have a rollback And at like what point does it become visually obvious from like the RTS perspective? Obviously, in a fighting game that has like hit stops and things like that, it's less obvious. But since the motion is so fluid with all your units on screen, like what does the rollback look like in your game if it were to occur?
So in the by far most common case, you don't notice it at all. But in those cases where you do go back and resimulate, and it does like change the present based off of like what your opponent did. Right now, the two that come to mind are if a unit dies, like you'll see the unit death, and then it'll suddenly like come back, and it's like very quick, but it is noticeable. And then the other ones are like with that projectile missile, you'll see the projectile launch with the VFX, and then all of a sudden it'll just briefly go away. But it's far less frequent than we feared. And for the most part, you don't really notice much, if any, at all, like during a normal game.
So those are just like the very shorthand negatives, and they sound very good. But like, what are some of the big from the testing that you just recently had with the most recent opening of the beta exactly of the in development code? What were some of the positives you noted from implementing rollback already?
So the biggest positive was just the overwhelming just support, enthusiasm, just like joy of like how much better the gameplay felt. So we got across the board just positive feedback on, hey, I haven't been able to play an RTS because the best ping I can get is 100 milliseconds. And they're delighted to actually be able to play one now.
That is actually a good point. I mean, the Koreans, we're talking about StarCraft 1 here. I mean, one of the reasons why they were the best and got to be the best is they were all competing on LAN, where like I can't remember the names of the programs. I think one was called Hamachi. That it was something similar to like what rollback netcode was for Brood War, in that it'll let you over the internet basically have a LAN connection. But I remember when my brother and me started using these tools to actually play on like better ping. It was such a different game. It was insane. And I remember the weirdness of practicing for a tournament, all year, getting to like WCG, and then you play on LAN, and it actually feels so much faster and so much different. Like all the things you would normally do at you could do from your kind of laggy PC at home if you play it online like me, you couldn't do, or players could just be so much faster. But I think sometimes being in Korea and playing on Korean servers, it's easy for me to forget. Like actually, a lot of places have not the best internet, and so to expand that player base is really exciting.
We had one instance of somebody having to stay in a hotel room with terrible internet, and they were able to play, and everything felt smooth and responsive. And then we actually have a few pros that are participating in the closed testing, and they parting specifically, like a renowned StarCraft 2 pro said it made his gameplay feel much better and more responsive while we had the rollback testing on. So it's not all like sunshine and roses. Like there are a few players that were experiencing some challenges, and that's what we're taking and actively looking through how to make that better for them. But sorry to keep it going, but like we were like, anxious and like excited because that was the point where it's like, okay, there's some bugs here, but things look great in our local like internal testing, and things look pretty darn great with like our contrived poor network conditions where we would simulate packets loss and things like that.
I see.
Time to get like the real world testing, even though there's still some bugs there, but we were only planning on having it up for just a few hours, and the response was so great we decided to keep it on for a couple extra days.
That's great. And I know you've got another alpha booked for December, is that right? It's called Devastator.
Code name Devastator. Yep. It'll be sometime in December.
Yeah. Is there like, I know it's very like soon, but is there any feedback from that you've taken already? Like, all right, we're going to definitely implement this for the next time, the next alpha, we're going to have this kind of ready?
So there were, I'll just fully be transparent about the issues we saw. There was a desync that we saw that if you're not familiar with deterministic simulations, all the clients have to run the same exact simulation without deviating whatsoever so that they can stay in sync. So far, Snowplay has been phenomenal. Like we hadn't seen a single desync period with any of our closed testing. But with rollback, it does increase the likelihood of seeing a desync, since you have to go back and resimulate and restore the state of the world when you do that. So we did see one of those that the community was great in helping us track down. We've addressed that one for sure. And then there are a few just known visual like artifacts as a result, like a projectile starting but just staying in the world because we never actually went back and cleaned it up as a result of Unreal needing to have some awareness of what's going on.
That makes sense. I mean, this is like very new. It's kind of a new frontier, I guess. Not many people, no one's tried this before, and you're pretty much the first to kind of go for it and try rollback code in an RTS. The idea of it being, is there a chance that if it is successful and if it works, and it seems to be, that you would license it out maybe to other studios to kind of, because the rising tide floats all boats, as the saying goes. Would that be something you'd consider, like, for other RTS titles?
That is something we're considering downstream. Like we are building it from the ground up to just run fully agnostic from whatever game engine. So it's built as a DLL. Just
wow. Okay, that's cool. Okay.
So if we wanted to, we could use Unity or whatever off the.
That's great.
Engine that's there. So at some point, yes. Right now, we're still in active development. But that is a long-term aspiration. Worst case, or I guess good case still, if and when we build like the next Stormgate or another title, we're ready to go for whatever that game might be.
Awesome. I actually have a question regarding a couple like specs things. Like, what is the minimum spec target exactly for the game for what you would consider like good? Like a lot of people on PC these days consider like 60 FPS a minimum. So what is your minimum spec look like actually?
So we are still in active development and we're trying to like narrow that down, have to give that disclaimer up front. But Windows 10 at a minimum, ideally higher than that. CPU is pretty darn important, especially for rollback. The faster the CPU, the more frames you can go resimulate. So that's one of the main things that we're focused on optimizing right now. For that 6 cores, 1 for Snowplay, and then the rest to let Unreal do its magic. Around 2.3 gigahertz is where we're seeing pretty decent performance there. Minimum of 16 gigs of RAM. Unreal, with all its greatness, is a bit, memory heavy. And then right now, at least in our closed testing, like around a GeForce GTX 1060 or something around those lines. So a graphics card that's just a few years old. But we're planning on continuing to optimize and make life better there. So it's pretty awesome to be on a project where we're doing closed testing like all the way through development, so we can hit a certain performance bar and then continue to optimize like as we go, where a lot of projects I've been on just wait till the very end to try to optimize as far as they can there.
So you mentioned there 6 cores, 1 and then 5 for Unreal, 1 for Snowplay itself in the background. But does Snowplay itself also, all of the simulation, the deterministic simulation, is it actually multi-threaded?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering how does it work? How is it like architected?
Yeah, for right now, it is just a single thread. It's so fast. Like we're targeting like 64 hertz. So I'm not going to do the math in my head, but to keep things deterministic, a single thread is much easier, and we're able to just go really fast, especially in the rollback scenario. We actually found that by simulating multiple frames, all from one thread, just all in one go, we get a lot of performance of like benefits from just everything being in cache. And I worked on games that went multi-threaded with deterministic sims, and it's a huge pain to keep everything deterministic, just with the threads running at different or finishing at different times and keeping all that in sync. So that we're definitely keeping it open for the future if we need to, but for right now, keeping it simple.
Okay, yeah, I was curious about that because when you said deterministic right at the beginning of this conversation, I was like, oh, what? Yeah, but what about multi-threading? So that's really cool to know. I have a question then about scaling. Unreal Engine 5 supports TSR, like to scale the resolution up and down, really nice, and get also good clean quality. Do you plan on supporting any of the third-party scalers at all, like DLSS, FSR2, XeSS, frame generation, if someone wants to turn that on?
So the main one we're looking at right now is DLSS. We just implemented it, and it's magical, like for if your graphics card supports it.
Mm-hmm.
We're not banking on that to get our hit our target frame rate, but we see it as just a really convenient boost if you have a card that does support it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the others, most of those acronyms, I admit I don't know, but we're gonna as we get time freed up, we're looking at implementing them.
Okay.
That's awesome. And obviously, I took a peek at the graphics menu settings. You've got it's early days, obviously. There's a kind of a general global toggle for going up to Ultra, I believe. Is there plans to make like a more nuanced, advanced graphics sort of menu for people who want to dive into all the others, the textures, lighting, shadows, all the usuals? Is that something that's on the cards?
Yeah, so I don't know exactly where we're going to land for each of those, but effectively, as soon as we find a need to play with it ourselves internally, we by default will make a new menu option just so that it's something our players can benefit from. And that's where almost all of those menu options that are in the game right now come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Earlier you talked about Lumen having like a one frame and then some like accumulation frames afterwards, which was causing like visual oddities when you would click around the map. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Developing an RTS and the visuals for it, has there been other instances of that too as well that you've noticed with UE5's rendering that, it's kind of developed for contiguous first person or third person camera movement, but did you notice any oddities elsewhere that you would like to talk about or challenges in making RTS work on Unreal Engine 5?
So in terms of just like oddities or things that we had to work around for RTS, there wasn't many outside of the lighting side of things. One of the things that we are doing that is presenting a ton of challenges is we aren't using Unreal's terrain editor just out of the box. One of our core focuses is all the development tools that we're using to build our campaign, our internal maps. We want to be able to provide to players, and a big aspect of that is the ability to edit and create terrain. And we can't just ship Unreal tools.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the terrain editor in Unreal is totally crazy what you can make with it, but that's good. They're going to have some kind of an editor that players can use so we can make maps and even little games inside the game. I probably would be similar to what the StarCraft 2 map editor would be. Obviously a better version, but
like with the game. So we did have to build our own terrain editor and our own full-on trigger editor. So for that, all of that's like homegrown. So in short, to support the map creation tooling that you'd expect from an RTS, like we weren't able to use any of the Unreal terrain solutions there. We can still leverage a lot, but the tooling itself is all homegrown.
How does actually the terrain editor work? Is it like a height map based thing that you're painting in?
Yep.
Or it is? Okay, cool.
It's like you fully paintable, so you can paint terrain, you can paint cliffs, there's a whole lot that goes into it.
Okay, that's kind of awesome. And just a quick question about so how exactly does the pathfinding work on the terrain that someone has painted? Like, what exactly is the pathfinding Is it a mesh? Is it something
So
else?
as you're painting, we'll dynamically generate a pathing mesh,
Cool.
like as you go. So that's just getting computed in close to real time as you're just painting the terrain, adding cliffs, adding trees, which has been a huge undertaking. It's almost like an event within our company that almost every milestone we've had something to do with trees.
Who knew trees?
Those trees.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So for those just to geek out about it,
Mhm.
the every tree is we wanted to have a gameplay like element to it, and we also wanted to be like really visually appealing since it'll cover a large majority of some of our forest like biome maps. So for that, each one like has to simulate in snowplay so that we can, if you destroy it, we can update the pathing mesh like with via dynamic footprint.
Mhm.
We also want it to look visually good, which we can't really simulate, or at least if we wanted to target lower end machines, we couldn't use some of the out of the box Unreal. So just shout out to our tech artist, namely Rafal. He implemented a compute shader to handle all of the visual sides of like units when they're in proximity of the tree. You can see them actually like moving it and causing like little disruptions there.
Cool.
The destruction of the tree, like exploding, all of that without the need for like any physics calculations. And it really substantially reduced the rendering cost of things there.
I guess as a StarCraft 2 fan, I got some nerd questions about like what the plans are for the future, and is there like the sort of races you have in mind? I believe there are 2 right now, and there are plans for. Is it going to be kind of like rock paper scissors situation, triangle, or is it going to be you're going to go all out? I know this is a far out question, but is it going to be many races that you can choose rather than just the 3?
Yeah, the current plan is targeting 3. The 2 that we've announced and you can play right now are the Resistance and the Infernal. So the Resistance is more your traditional like human faction that players will be like more eased into the genre for. And then we have the Infernals, which is our more demonic race that we're doing lots of fun stuff with. Then we have a 3rd race that we're keeping
Close to your
big secret right now that we're really excited for.
That's cool. And there's a story mode as well in this as well with cinematics planned. Is that right? Are you planning on using pre-rendered cinematics or going in-engine, since UE5 has got a decent tool set to do a lot of in-engine stuff?
Yeah, so all of our cinematics are in-engine.
Cool.
And we're
Good.
planning on doing it's like pretty awesome just to be able to like just see it all running in real time. So that's definitely the plan as of right now.
Saves on the install size, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's so much better. I love in-engine cinematics. It's actually one of my favorite parts about StarCraft 2 is that they did all that back then. That was always so much fun.
I've dealt with the nightmares of like
I didn't
gigs
actually
of
realize
video
that. I don't know why that didn't occur to me. I guess that was an engine. Huh.
that you have to like try to compress and just make it look as high quality as you can. So thankful to not have to go through that again.
Yeah, that sounds great.
We are planning on a full experience single player mode, and we are like dogfooding our own tooling as we build it. The hope is that our campaign tools are good enough that players can take them at some point after we release the core game. We're trying to get that up first, but the goal is that they can make their own games within games, like we saw with Blizzard style RTSs, with things like MOBAs or whatever our content creators can come up with.
No, that's awesome. Regarding just kind of supporting stuff on PC, since you mentioned cinematics, 16:9 standard typical resolution, but obviously you start getting into competitive differences with different ones. Like, is there planned support for cinematic monitors, 4:3 monitors, anything like that? I mean,
yeah, well, I can't speak to exactly which format we're gonna like ultimately land on, but we're going through all the different like permutations on aspect ratios and so on, and looking for like the most common ones, the ones that players like really are seeking high quality for, and keeping all of those in mind. And it's driving our UX guys a little bit nuts, but that's more seriously, they are the ones that are passionate about supporting like everything we possibly can.
Hey.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Like, it's been really great. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing another RTS making a kind of revival. There's been a lot of,
with the campaign,
with the campaign.
I love campaigns. Like, it's one thing that I always feel like, since there's the competitive is so important, actually seeing someone actually care about a campaign in an RTS game is really awesome, I think.
Yeah, we're incredibly ambitious, but we have a world-class team that's really, that feels the same exact way. We're really missing the next RTS, and we're all passionate about delivering across the board on all those things. We do plan on being a live service, so it won't be just like we launch and then we're done. We'll be continuously creating content like all the way through. So that's another thing that Snowplay sets us up well for, is just our content creation tools to just keep it coming and keeping the great gameplay and storytelling alive.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for talking to us today.
Yep, thank you for the opportunity. And I have to plug, like, please wishlist us on Steam. The game is Stormgate, and we appreciate the support.
Wishlisted, chat. Failure is not an option. That's exciting. Well, as soon as I am able to do content on Stormgate, I will. So if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think about the features, the engine they're using, and the beta is going to be coming out eventually here. So the future's bright. Thank you so much for watching that, and I will see you in a future video. Bye-bye.